The golden rule of tourism: don't be obnoxious. And if you're headed to Mexico, you're in luck. We've collected a quick and dirty list of don'ts to keep you safe, happy, and respectable. We Americans love to say we're into spicy food. We slather our burritos with extra hot salsa and brag about how much heat we can take. But let's face it, our hottest hot sauce is like ketchup compared to what you get in Mexico. Hot chili peppers thrive in the Mexican climate, so they've always been a big part of Mexican cuisine. And locals believe that eating spicy chili peppers can actually help you manage the hot climate. Spicy food makes you sweat, and sweat helps you cool down as it evaporates. That is, if you can take it.
Shen has lost the use of her hands.
The bottom line is Mexican chefs aren't about to mellow out their food for you, so when your dish arrives, taste first. Make sure you can manage the heat before you double down with more hot sauce.
Montezuma, there shall be no revenge! Revenge!
We know you know this, so why do so many people still do it? Is it that the advice is repeated so often that it's almost become an urban legend? It is not. We're here to tell you it's still a very bad idea to drink tap water in Mexico. In fact, in some parts of the country, the locals don't even drink water from the tap. Why, you ask? Well, the water table in the Yucatan is high, so it's easily contaminated by trash and runoff, which means it's full of bacteria and God knows what else, and none of it is good. But not drinking the water isn't nearly enough. You should also not use it to brush your teeth, and you should be wary of fresh fruits and vegetables, which are grown in local farms and are often fertilized with pig and, wait for it, human dung. Also, the produce isn't washed very well, and if it is, it's washed in tap water, so you see where we're going with this. Some restaurants purify their vegetables, which makes them safe to eat. And if so, that will be printed right on the menu. And if that message isn't on the menu, skip the raw fruits and vegetables. And don't forget that salsa qualifies as raw fruits and vegetables. To make matters worse, the salsa served at Mexican restaurants usually sits out all day and isn't changed between patrons. So if all that other stuff didn't gross you out, well, there's a little bonus for you.
Yo quiero Taco Bell.
You might think you love Mexican food, but if you've only ever had fast casual stuff from the usual chains in America, you've actually never really had it. Case in point, when Latinos see Taco Bell, they think American food. Ask anyone. Many of the staples of Mexican cuisine in the States don't show up in authentic Mexican cuisine. So beef burritos with cheddar cheese, beef burritos with cheddar cheese and black beans, and beef burritos with cheddar cheese, black beans, and flour tortillas are all totally off the menu. A lot of what we eat in America is Tex-Mex, which has its roots in Mexican cuisine but has evolved over the last century and a half or so to incorporate wheat flour, beef, and other ingredients common in Texas but hardly ever eaten in Mexico. So the bottom line is, don't expect Tex-Mex when you go out to eat in Mexico. And don't say things like, this isn't anything like the Mexican food I get in Boise, because that's just rude. Even the most clueless tourist knows to respect the religious beliefs and practices of the locals. But for some reason, that respect doesn't always seem to extend to the Virgin of Guadalupe, who is a big deal in Mexico, and not just because one portrait of her is 65 feet tall. The Virgin of Guadalupe is the patron saint of Mexico and a symbol of Mexican identity. According to legend, she appeared in 1591 to an indigenous man named Juan Diego on Tepeyac Hill, which today is a suburb of Mexico City. And she's not just a religious symbol, but also a patriotic one. One wonders why a tourist would be compelled to make fun of such an obviously venerated symbol. But tourists are notoriously clueless, callous, and arrogant, so it's not totally shocking. But please hold your tongue. Making fun of the Virgin of Guadalupe is a double insult. You're not only dissing the faith of the vast majority of Mexicans, but also their national identity. It's as bad as insulting a Mexican's mother, which, by the way, you also shouldn't do. Many of us greet the warmer weather by kicking off our boots and swapping them for sandals and flip-flops. But if your travels happen to take you to a big city in Mexico, please rethink your shoes. In Mexico, no one wears flip-flops in the city. Beaches, sure, but flip-flops in the city are problematic. First, they scream tourist, and the locals will automatically have less respect for you if you're traipsing about in beach footwear. Also, ew. Cities are crowded, dirty places, and if you're walking around the streets essentially barefoot with a little bit of rubber strapped to your soles, your feet are going to be pretty filthy when you get back to your hotel for the evening. If you typically travel in European countries, you may find that a lot of people, especially those in the service industry, speak the language of commerce. It's good business to know English when you work in a tourist-focused business, but Mexico is different.
They don't even speak English!
Mexico ranks 43rd in English language proficiency among the world's non-English speaking nations. So if you plan to stick to the stereotypical tourist activities, you can probably get by with no Spanish. But if you're planning to go beyond the usual tourist traps, do yourself and our national reputation a favor and learn some basics of the local language.
I came here to haggle, and we's gonna haggle.
Nobody haggles in America, at least not outside of a car lot or Craigslist. But in Mexico, you can plan on haggling for just about everything, with the exception of items sold in big chain stores. Street vendors will typically ask about twice what their products are worth with the expectation that there will be some haggling. If you just accept the sticker price at face value, you're not only being a sucker, but you're cheating yourself out of an opportunity to impress with your outstanding bargaining skills. There are polite limits, though. Remember that market sellers are often supporting families in a difficult economy, so your sweet score means less income for them and less food for their kids. Haggle, yes, but don't haggle a lot. The stuff is already pretty cheap, and if you're on vacation, you probably don't need the extra pesos as much as they do.
Whose side are you on, Eddie?
What? What sides are there?
Mine or the ozones? Choose one!
If you're going to be spending hours in the sun, people, wear sunscreen. This is true wherever you are, but for some unfathomable reason, tourists sometimes think sun exposure is the same no matter where you go. That's why British people always look like tomatoes when they go to Florida. If you haven't noticed, there's no sun in England, so they think they don't burn. Similarly, Americans and Canadians and other northerners may not be prepared for the intensity of the sun in Mexico. Even if you think you don't burn, well, in Mexico you just might. Mexico is closer to the equator, which means the sun is closer to you. It doesn't really matter where you go. It's always a good idea not to wear flashy jewelry or carry large bills around with you, unless you're in an all-millionaire environment. But it's especially true in places where there's a lot of poverty. Pickpockets tend to ply their craft in crowded spots like public transport stations, shopping centers, concerts, and the like. And you should also be careful with your credit and debit cards. Never give your card to your server at a restaurant. Instead, pay at their card terminal. Also, avoid using debit cards at the gas station, because card skimming is pretty popular in some locations. Americans take cabs, and since the birth of Uber, will even quite happily get into someone's private vehicle, which would have been really weird 20 years ago and now feels totally normal and not at all dangerous.
It's your first night? Yeah. Driving? First night driving the old Ubs.
But in Mexico City in particular, you can't just flag down a cab wherever you happen to be. Well, you can, but not every cab is licensed. And the unlicensed ones aren't just operating illegally, they might actually be engaged in other extra-legal activities like kidnapping or extortion of their customers. Taxi-related crime doesn't happen as often as it did 10 or 15 years ago, but when it does, it usually goes down like this. The taxi picks you up, but instead of taking you to your destination, it takes you to an ATM. Then you're told to withdraw cash, hand over all your belongings, and to make matters worse, it still won't take you to your destination. Instead, the driver drops you off in some remote area. So how can you avoid such a nightmare scenario? Only ride in cabs that have a distinctive white license plate that has a leading capital letter and 5 numbers. Unlicensed cabs won't have these kinds of plates. Other than that, you can use a taxi rank cab, which is basically a cab service you call for rather than hailing on the street. You can bring your own car, but it's risky, and you need to make sure you really know what you're doing. First of all, you need to have insurance, and not Geico or AAA. You need to carry Mexican insurance. The policy you hold while you're in Mexico needs to be purchased from a company registered with the Mexican Department of Insurance, and that includes absolutely no U.S. insurers. 0. If you do drive your own car in Mexico and don't buy Mexican insurance, you'll be okay as long as you're not involved in an accident. If you are involved in an accident, though, and Mexican officials decide the accident is your fault, you will be taken into custody until you can prove your ability to pay for the damage. Yes, in Mexico, you will go to jail for being uninsured and kept there until you pay. So really, if you're too cheap to buy an insurance policy during your visit, you should just leave your car at home. Sure, you probably won't get into an accident, but if you do, it's going to ruin your vacation. And probably your return home, too. We Americans like to be waited on. We like polite service, we like attentive service, and most of all, we like prompt service. But before you go to Mexico, you need to change your expectations, because prompt service isn't an essential part of your waiter's job description, or in anyone else's job description for that matter.
Excuse me, but I used to work in a bar, so I know what it's like to wait on people.
Look, things are just a lot more laid back in Mexico, which is part of what makes it the perfect place for a relaxing vacation. But sometimes American tourists have a hard time understanding that they really don't need super prompt service while they're trying to relax. Even people living in Mexico have come to expect that the guy they hired to fix the roof might not actually show up until 2 or 3 hours after he said he would. And the same is true for waiters and other service professionals. So if you're going out for dinner, don't expect it to be grab and go. Plan to spend a good chunk of your evening at the restaurant and just relax and enjoy.